Alright, so we are starting our second tutorial of 2 tutorials using Crayola Color Pencils, and these are just regular Crayola Color Pencils. These aren't the signature ones. I have actually ordered the signature ones, so we will be taking a look at those in the near future. But for today, we're using plain old Crayolas that you can find at your local Walmart or Michael's or just anywhere. So, in our last tutorial, talked about the basics of coloring with color pencils. Okay, maybe this is not a good pencil sharpener. I showed you how to color Caucasian skin. I gave you some color picks that would work well for that. Actually, this is a terrible sharpener. Really? For the life of me, I don't have any inexpensive color pencils that aren't terrible. So I showed you how to color Caucasian skin. We're going to do a darker skin tone, and we are starting with light brown. And we're going to do a very light all over layer with light brown. And I am using fluid Easy Block watercolor paper. You can also use Canson XL, either the watercolor or the mixed media. Both of them are great. These techniques will also work in most sketchbooks, but I do recommend you work on a heavier paper. It can stand up to your color pencil a little bit better. And you can find most of those papers I just mentioned at Walmart or Michael's, any mega store. A lot of your office stores will probably sell those as well. Trying to keep my recommendations super accessible. I want y'all making art, not having to track down art supplies. Now I do have tutorials where we use slightly nicer materials to make things. And Walmart also carries Prismacolor pencils they had the 12-pack this week, but during August in their back to school section they carry the 24-pack, and that's the pack I have for demonstration purposes here. So if you guys are interested in December, when I'm back in Luling, back to doing affordable art supply stuff, I can do a Prismacolor tutorial as well. Although a lot of the techniques I'm showing you guys that work for Crayola are a great way to get started with Prismacolor as well. And I'm using small circular movements. Alright, so we've got our base color of light brown down. I'm going to switch real quick and do some shadow on the tops of her eyes. And then I'm also going to don't have to do this, but add little bit of pink in the corners of her eyes if you want to. And then we're going to use a little bit of Mahogany. Just go ahead and put down a base on her lips. And then also on her cheeks. And Mahogany is a reddish brown. And if you watch, and I do highly recommend you watch my other color pencil tutorial, I talked to you guys about swatching and blending. So I'm putting a little bit of red anywhere skin would overlap, and anywhere there would be blush. So I'm gonna go in with a more intense, redder red and just add some along the cheeks, sort of coloring in a fan shape motion. And then the same goes for her cheeks. And then we're going to go ahead and work a little heavier with that light brown. Now, for darker skin tones, you might not want as much of the white of the paper showing as we use for the Caucasian skin tone. So we can use a Prismacolor colorless blender, if you have one, to sort of blend the colors. But I would recommend you wait to the end, because you can end up mashing down your surface to the point where your color pencil will no longer, you won't be able to put down further layers of color even if you're using a darker pencil. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to overload our paper surface. And it's totally okay to work back and forth between colors. Or to rework areas so that they are darker. I know there's a lot of YouTubers who kind of take advantage of the fact that people might not know better to try and push divisive ideas, like using reference is not professional, which is ridiculous. That is not true. Professionals of all artistic stripes heavily rely on reference. But I do try to be a little bit more laid back when I talk to you guys, because I don't want, if you've got something that works for you, you've got a method that I haven't discussed or I don't know about, I don't want you to feel like what you're doing isn't correct, or it's invalid, or it's not what a real artist would do. Real artists work in a variety of ways. Real artists have a variety of access to education and to other artists and to other ideas, and everyone kind of works differently. I'm just trying to show you guys some of the things I've learned through my years of art education and art study, both with formal training and with learning thanks to the internet and other artists sharing their resources, and learning by trial and error and making mistakes. So if you have a method that works really well, if you do something that's a little different from the norm, I don't want you to feel like what you're doing is not art, not real. And it really bothers me that some YouTube creators take advantage of people like that in order to get popular, because they are disseminating really toxic information that is hindering a lot of artists from developing and growing, and I feel like that is morally wrong. So we now have regular brown, not just light brown, and it may take me longer to build up the skin tone since I don't want the white of the paper to show up as prominently as it does in the Caucasian skin tone. So I'm probably going to be working back and forth between light brown and regular brown, plain old brown. And if I do something, like I'm going to sort of darken and blend this with light brown a little bit. If I do something and you don't understand what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, you can let me know in the comments, and I'll try to tailor a tutorial to that question. There's only so much I can cover, but right now I'm using the mid-tone brown, regular brown, to start defining the curves of her face. I'm having a bit of a harder time with this skin tone because the white of the paper is really insistent on showing through. This is a time when using a tone tan paper or a craft paper like brown paper bags or a craft paper would be really helpful because it would establish a mid-tone, that medium value. So I would only then need to focus on doing the darkest values and the lightest values. But we are working on white paper today, so we have a little more work to do, and that's okay. I'm glad I can demonstrate this for you guys. And I do have some videos about using, or actually I think I have some blog posts on howtosoup.blogspot.com about using toned tan paper. I love toned paper. And I can do some video stuff on it if you guys are so interested and you so clamor for it in the comments. But I think you guys can probably see how these colors are already mixing somewhat on the paper surface. Now, next, I want to start adding shadow. And in the 24 pack, there isn't a dark red violet. There's really just violet purple. So I'm going to use this bluish purple and try to be really careful about where I use it. And I'm using this to establish cast shadows like underneath the neck there, right underneath. Just can use that on the lips a little bit. Not too much though. Underneath the nose. Underneath the eyebrows like that. And definitely where the hair would cast a shadow onto her face. Now, if you're not comfortable using a purple, you can just use a really dark version of the skin tone, in this case a really dark brown. But I would really recommend you don't necessarily use black to add your shadows. There are times when using black is a good idea, but on skin tones, it's just really would not be my first choice. Now, there definitely are artists who probably do, and it probably looks great. I cannot speak for all of the artists. And if you can find one who does that, whose work you really like, and you want to try learning how they do it, I really think you ought to. I think it's a great idea. Add a little more mahogany to the cheeks. Try to build that blush up. But my tutorials, I would really recommend you don't. Okay, so now we're grabbing dark brown and start adding in our darkest shadows and working back through, tightening things up, darkening things a little bit. And in case you missed it, I did the line art with a Sharpie pen marker, which I don't actually have over here, so I can't actually show it to you, but I did use it. I did demonstrate how to use it in the Crayola, one of the Crayola Super Tips markers tutorial videos. A little bit underneath. Now we have a lot of white in her skin, and I want to use the Prismacolor blender and gently, you don't want to push too hard because it will push down the surface of your paper and you can't do layers on top of that. So what this is doing is it is using a little bit of wax blender or wax core. That's the uncolored core from Color Pencils, so it hasn't had any pigment or color added to it. And it's just sort of adding additional, almost like lubricant, a little bit of extra to push pigment around and help fill in just a few of those white divots. Now, it's not doing a perfect job, but it's doing an adequate job, I think. Now, I was very light-handed in some areas with my light brown, and unfortunately, my sharpener was not my friend, so I'm going to try to add a little more light brown down here. Also does a good job of sort of pushing your colors together. And that can make your colors look flatter and duller if you've layered a bunch of colors. So it is something to consider. It might not be a technique you want, but it might also be exactly what you're looking for because you might want the colors to blend a little bit better. Now, we can also use white to do that, to blend our colors, but using white will actually make her skin tone a little bit lighter. So only, in my opinion, you should really use that in areas where you want to lighten everything rather than just blend everything. So I'm going back in. I'd used some light brown to add a little more color to certain areas. Now I'm going to use regular brown to darken, add more shadow and contrast. And like I said in the Caucasian skin tutorial, you can also use the lighter color you put down just before you put down the next darkest color. So in this case, we could use light brown to blend out some of this medium brown if we want to. Really need a lot more here on her neck, which would be in shadow. And then we're going to use dark brown to really add some shadow back in. And definitely want to grab that purple and add some shadow underneath the hair. And also a little bit along the contours of her face. And then we're just going to have to call that a day, because without some spray fixative to add some texture back on, we're really not going to be able to do too much more. I will use a little of the white on her nose just to add a little bit of a highlight in addition to blending. and a little bit along her lips. As you guys can see, it's not putting down like a strong white mark. And then we'll go ahead and do her eyes, and we're starting with Cool Gray, which is more of a very pretty blue-green, or almost a sea green, like an ocean green. And then we're going to use a color called Slate. And Slate is actually a type of, actually we're going to go back to Cool Gray, but Slate is a type of rock. Now remember, we're going to leave a little crescent moon at the bottom. And go in there with Slate, which isn't really dark enough. And then we're going to use Pine Green. And I really feel like her eyes still need more contrast. So I'm going to grab the darkest blue I have, which is just blue. That's what you get with the 24 color pack. You don't get indigo. Let's see if we can at least add some interest to her eyes. Now, I was at Walmart today. I was looking for a white gel pen that I could use to pop some highlights in, and I actually couldn't find any that weren't sold in like a huge 24 pack. So if you're looking for a good white gel pen, I recommend you head on down to Michael's and get a white Uni Signo. You can also use gouache, which is a type of opaque watercolor. And if you guys are interested in gouache, there are loads of great YouTube channels. Hajira Meeks has a great YouTube channel where she uses gouache. Gosh. So for her hair, I actually want her hair to be a little bit different from her skin. So we're going to start with Mahogany. And I need to leave some bounce. So rather than doing that circular pattern, I'm going to kind of just loosely scribble some color in there. I'm going to fill it in more as we get towards the bottom because we're moving away from our light source. And then up here at the top, make sure to leave plenty of highlights. Little rough on my hands there. Now papers with smoother surfaces, you're not going to get as many of these little white highlight bumps like over in this section here. But you're not going to be able to do as many layers of color pencils unless you introduce a spray fixative. Now some people say you can use hairspray for that. And I am here to say, please don't, because it leaves it sticky and gummy and gross. And I personally am not a fan of it. But, you know, I'm sure there are other artists who are and will use it. I don't know. I'm not going to go out on a limb and claim I know any because I don't. But spray fixative is usually, I think you can get it at Walmart in the spray paint section if you need to. I used to be able to get it in the art supply section too. But the art supply section at the Luling Walmart is weird, and there's often just stuff that I know other Walmarts sell that they don't sell because it's not really a big town, and it doesn't really have a large art community, so it's not like they see a lot of business for art supplies. So your Walmart might sell the Krylon spray mat in the art supply section or in hardware. And honestly, I wouldn't say ask someone for help because most of the time they don't really know what you're talking about. So just look and take a chance. I do know that Michaels also sells that spray, and a lot of art supply stores will sell spray fixatives, and you're looking for a spray matte fixative. Now the matte is going to add a texture to your paper again, so you can continue to create layers of watercolor. You can get way more layers than what I'm able to get today. However, if you're going to go to all that trouble, then you've probably already started collecting like Prismacolors or Polychromos. And you can usually get a few more layers with those as well. Next, we're going to use dark brown. I'm going to go ahead and try to fill in her eyebrows, and then also we're going to fill in her hair. And we're going to go back with Mahogany and blend this out and fill some more layers in. This fluid paper may just not have enough tooth to it, honestly, and you may end up preferring to work on a vellum surface. Now, vellum used to refer to a sheepskin product that was used like paper, so sort of like papyrus, but vellum for the most part these days does not actually contain any sheep or sheepskin. Instead, it refers to a paper surface that has a lot of tooth, a lot of texture to it. And you're probably going to be looking at Vellum Bristol. And the 300 series, the yellow cover series from Strathmore, is probably fine to learn on, probably good to practice on. And then when you are ready to really start making your masterpieces, the 500 series, which is much more expensive but very nice, I like to ink on it. The 500 series is a good paper to use. Now, they don't sell that at Michaels and they don't sell that at Walmart, so you're going to have to actually hit the up an art supply store and pick that up there. All right, going back in with the dark red. I'm not really getting as much color depth as I would have liked. So what are your favorite color pencils to use? What kind of color pencils do you guys typically use in your collection? I don't really use a lot of color pencils. I do use a lot of watercolor pencils, and my favorite are, and people always have to point out, they're not really watercolor, Becca, they're ink. All right, telling that to the person who's been painting watercolor comics for 5 years. Derwent Inktense. watercolor pencils or ink pencils because they're indelible and you cannot rework them after they've dried, and that's kind of the difference between watercolor pencils and ink pencils. But those are my favorite. Now I do sometimes use color pencils to add details to my webcomic 7-inch Kara, which you guys can read at 7inchkara.com, and you can read it for free or on Tumblr if you prefer it, 7inchkara.tumblr.com. But I use Faber-Castell Polychromos, Caran d'Ache Albrecht Dürer, no, Pablo, but I do have some Albrecht Dürer pencils as well, and some Prismacolor, and I prefer, and I really love Derwent Color Soft color pencils. They're very soft and very blendable, and they put down a lot of color fast, which is my jam. This is very slow color, very slowly. And I am not a patient woman anymore. Used to be. And even the thing about cheap art supplies is you can, except with the most absolute garbage supplies, you can usually finesse them into doing something decent if you're willing to spend a lot of time on it. Basically, with art, if you do not have money, you spend time. And a lot of people don't mind that. A lot of people find it very relaxing. Oh, we're using black now. We're going to do the darkest parts of the hair. Hopefully I can punch up that contrast. But I don't mind spending money to have nice things that will last me many years. And I also don't mind spending time, but I don't necessarily like spending a lot of time finessing tutorial stuff because I'd rather be working on my comic pages. Adding a little bit more mahogany, darkening up her hair, kind of finessing it as we go along. I'm going to grab that dark brown, add that here, add that here, add that here. So you guys can see there is a lot of back and forth, and they're larger collections of Crayola color pencils. Crayola sells a 100-pack for 14 bucks at Walmart now, which is about the same price the 100-pack of Crayola Super Tips cost, and it's going to cost a little bit more on Amazon and a lot more at Michael's, so bring your coupons. Okay, now then I can go over this with that Prismacolor. What I would really like to do is get some actual black in her hair. Even though I'm using black, it's not really showing up as black because the paper has so much texture that it's leaving a lot of white, and your eyes read that as a mid-tone. Maybe using the burnisher would be a better idea. Okay, so I talk about burnishers in my other color pencil tutorial, and basically what a burnisher does is it smushes down, it's made of harder stuff than the other two, it smushes down the paper texture and smushes the pigment into where used to be the valleys and holes, but it's not helping so much. You can also just push down super duper hard with your color pencil to help fix some of those problems. All right, I think we are about donezo with these Crayola Color Pencils. I may do a mixed media tutorial as my last one where I demonstrate how you can use the super tips along with Crayola Color Pencils and maybe even Crayola colors and various techniques, including using your super tips as watercolor markers, which is pretty cool. I may do a big tutorial on that as my last one for this set. But I plan on doing another series of affordable, accessible art supply tutorials in December. So get those comments in. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you'd like to see demonstrated. I just ordered the so Crayola offers 2 different types of color pencils in their signature line, and I have their signature brush markers now. So I am going to try to review those and demonstrate those in a bit, probably when I get back to Nashville. They're all out of order now. I just shoved them in there. So if that is something that you guys are interested in checking out, keep an eye on this channel. I have loads of drawing tutorials, painting tutorials, watercolor tutorials, marker tutorials here on the channel. So I hope you guys will stick around, watch some of my other videos, and let me know what you guys think. So I hope you guys have a great day. As always, it has been lovely to see you guys, and I hope to hear back from you guys. So, bye!